We're live. Hey, good evening, everybody. Jana and I have been posting today that we are going to have a big announcement, and I'm going to give that in just a few minutes. I wanted to take just a couple minutes to welcome people, do a little small talk, give people time to kind of come in and catch on what's going on. I'm sitting here with my golden doodle. Jana is a bit under the weather this evening and is resting. So it is me and the golden doodle. Our dog's named Bailey. She's pretty cute and she's hardworking. Timothy and I spent about an hour with her out in a dog park today. And she loves being in the water. She loves retrieving. I keep wondering if this dog would hunt. But she looks so silly. Anyway, I'm going to have a big announcement in just a few moments. Again, Jana is not feeling the best, but she is the producer for this show. She's behind the scenes right now, and everything I say comes off of a script that she is promoting. I am, for all of you that don't know, I'm just a stupid front man. Anyway, let me get to our big announcement. Many of you probably noticed a few weeks ago that Jana and I, and our son Timothy, were in North Dakota. We were exploring some things with East Africa Diaspora. We had heard rumors and we had read research and we'd even read an article in Wall Street Journal and started digging and saw it was in other places of Al Jazeera and BBC that there's this surge of African immigration coming into the Dakotas. We wanted to go and check that out and see what does that look like. I was preaching at a church in Bismarck called Revive Christian Church, and I ended up speaking just very briefly at a church in Dickinson called Adonai Evangelical Church. And after a couple weeks away and conversations with people at Revive Christian Church, we have made a decision that we plan in November to shift our base of operation from Chicago to Bismarck, North Dakota. And as we do that, probably one of the biggest things is we did not want to move someplace where we would be moving alone. We wanted to be part of a local body, and we are going to be taking a part-time teaching. Yep, I am back. And then we're going to be shifting the base of our operations, serving East Africa Diaspora, to North Dakota and make Bismarck kind of our hub. I want to walk you through just a few things in our life. I want to tell you a little bit about my history and some of the hopes I've had for a long, long time. 2, talk a little bit more about Revive Christian. 3, about what we're seeing with East African Diaspora that are in North Dakota. And 4, talk about our family settling there. For those that don't know, in fact, I changed my Facebook profile this week. I put a picture of myself with a big northern pike that I caught about 8 years ago on a lake that my parents at the time lived at. And I grew up in Minnesota. My grandparents lived in northern Minnesota. My parents retired while my mom was in good health to northern Minnesota. I grew up spending my fall and winters deer hunting. I spent my springs and summers fishing. I considered myself a Minnesota boy. And my dad worked road construction, sometimes would end up doing work in the Dakotas. I had an uncle named Alan Eartrud, who was a cattle buyer. And I followed my Uncle Alan and my dad several times as a kid into the Dakotas. And I always just really loved it. In fact, there was a point, probably my late teens, early 20s, where I actually started praying, asking God to bring me to the Dakotas. I loved the open spaces. I won't tell you my stories, but a short story is when I was a junior in college, I was on spring break. My dad had sold a bucket for a backhoe to a construction company that was in Williston, North Dakota. And he asked me to spend 2 days of my spring break driving one day from Minneapolis to Williston, get in a hotel, and drive back the next day. And I remember on that drive, I specifically said, God, I love the beauty of this country. Bring me back to it. And then I tucked it away for 30 years. I thought, with all the variables in my life, I never saw a reality where I thought I was going to end up back in North Dakota. Those realities have kind of come to play, and let me tell you the first thing, because I think for those of you that kind of follow us, you probably see a lot of conversations we have with East Africa Diaspora that have settled in the United States. Sometimes we have conversations with things in Africa. Sometimes we have conversations with East African Diaspora that are in Europe, in Asia. But you're probably going, what's this pastoring thing, and what's Revive Christian? And let me tell you a little bit about Revive Christian. Maybe I'll say this. Jan and I have always sensed we should be part of a local church. Over the last couple of years, too, as we've adapted to the United States, we have continued to start to say, hey, God's given us some skills that's beyond serving African immigrants. We're skilled Bible teachers. God's allowed us to raise 5 kids. They've done fairly well. We've been able to plant and grow churches in the past. We seem to have a sense of how to look at a region through the eyes of a missionary and figure out how do you organize God's people to approach this well and make a gospel impact. And we've increasingly thought that we should not only have a role of leadership amongst diaspora peoples in the West, but we should have a role of leadership within local churches in America. Revive Christian is a 7-year-old church. They were planted by Northern Plains Evangelistic Association a little over 7 years ago. They had grown in Bismarck up to about 90 at one point, and then their lead pastor left to take another position about 13 months ago. And as they did that, I think they've gone through some refining. They've had a little bit of a loss in attendance, but they've moved from a leadership structure that was a management team to a structure of having their own eldership. There's a young pastoral couple, and I hope I can speak well of them, Raphael and Tabitha Cadillo, who have been with Revive since the very beginning. And you know, I'm 52, Raphael's 31, Tabitha, I guess I can't tell a woman's age, but she's kind of in that ballpark. And you know, if you think about this, being young, moving from Indiana to Bismarck, helping to start a church, then the lead guy leaves, and it's you, they've done a tremendous work with that church. And I have been so impressed. And if you listen to Raphael lead worship, you're listening to somebody who God has given a great amount of talent to. And they have, for about 13 months, been without their lead teaching pastor. And they basically put together an eldership, shared out the teaching responsibility, and then were looking for somebody to come, and they weren't looking for somebody who was going to be the traditional vision bearer. They were not looking for someone to tell them what to do. They were looking for somebody who could come and strengthen the teaching of the church, sit with the elders, and lead as part of a team. And we, in our early 50s, that's very appealing to us. We felt like we had some things to offer, but we didn't want to be going it alone, and to be with a talented young pastoral couple and 3 other elders was just real appealing. So we filled out a long application, went out and interviewed, spent a week with them, and I'm going to say this for people from Revive who are watching this, I like you guys. Jana likes you guys. Timothy likes you guys. And frankly, I don't often walk into a church where I like everybody that's there. But we walked into Revive, and we went to dinners, and we went to fellowships, and we met with the search team, and we met with their families, and we met with the elders and their families. And I walked away liking everybody. And I have found that as I'm sitting still, or I go for a run in the morning, or I wake up in the middle of the night, some of the first people to come to my mind are the people at Revive. And we've been praying for you guys, and we're really eager to get out there. So, point 1, we're always wanted to live in North Dakota. 2, we're going to take a part-time teaching role at Revive. I think that will be, I'm probably preaching about 2/3 of the time, providing some pastoral care, sitting with the elders and other leaders, and crafting a vision and trying to move things forward. Secondly, you guys have already saw this. We got caught, our attention was captured by what's happening with African immigration into the Dakotas. And I think if you had seen some of the stuff I'd put on Facebook, the Wall Street Journal about 8 months ago ran an article on birth rates and race in different states. And I looked at it and I saw all these black-skinned families, African American families that were from Kansas north to the Canadian border in the states of Nebraska, Iowa, North and South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. And I looked and I thought, that's not typically where the African American population, whose heritage goes back to slavery and Jim Crow, that's not where they've landed. And my gut said, that's African immigrants. I'd even heard a few rumors. I started researching, digging online, looking at what others were writing, trying to figure out, find some demographics, started calling and writing friends. And there has been this big surge of African immigration into those states. What it's largely been, specifically in North and South Dakota, a phrase I've heard some people say is it's secondary immigration. Some African immigrants are refugees that have been settled by Lutheran Social Services or the Catholic Church, Catholic relief agencies, but the bulk of them are people, African immigrants, who came to the United States probably as a green card lottery or as refugee or on a student visa and found a way to put down a route, and they were probably in a global city like Chicago or LA or Houston or New York, and after a while were just kind of stuck. And they heard rumors that the economy's doing well in North Dakota, and they heard rumors that the culture is more conducive to their basic belief system, and they had a friend or two who moved, and then they just started moving. And there's been a real big surge of what some are calling secondary immigration into the Dakotas, largely because the economy's doing well, the culture respects a lot of Christian rhythms, and people are finding a way to settle into life. So we went out and looked, and we said, yep, it's here. There's African stores, there's African churches, and something that's caught my attention is if I'm in Bismarck and I start looking at photos of high school or college soccer teams, all the soccer teams I can find within about 90 miles of Bismarck have 1 to 4 young men or young women of African descent. Our African people are playing soccer in North Dakota. And I somehow, like I saw Chicago, I can find some churches that are doing things. I can find some social services that are doing some things. I can find a young organization I really like called Global Neighbors out of Bismarck that's doing some good things. But I can't find a old missionary, if you guys will allow Jan and I to call ourselves, who's moved into the Dakotas and say, hey, we want to help out. So we think there's a niche there. Let me also add, if you are thinking, okay, how do you fit with this and how much money are you making? It's a part-time role with Revive. We're largely going because we believe in the people of Revive, but we're not going to significantly change our income out there. If you've been giving to us, supporting us as missionaries, we still will need your support. In fact, we're going to be trying to raise more support. We don't quite think we've got enough to live in a healthy way in the Dakotas. But that's the first thing, called by God. Second, Revive. Third, African immigration's happening. Third, or the fourth big thing is our son Timothy. And I think most of you that follow us, you know that Timothy has some health struggles. Years ago, we defined him as having a minor case of cerebral palsy. When you saw Timothy, you would notice his right hand's crumpled up. He doesn't have much use of it. And then most people would notice, but he's really clever. He can be funny. Sometimes he's very persistent. And if you ever get him running, he's usually the fastest man out there. And we've generally said, well, he's got a minor case of cerebral palsy. The last couple of years, as he's been a teenager, we've gotten access to much better medical care. We've realized it's much more complex. There is a significant brain injury that Timothy had when he was in his mother's womb. He's got a pretty significant injury on his left hemisphere, and that affects things like high levels of anxiety. It affects everything that's on his right side, so it affects his digestion, his respiration. And we have noticed that Chicago is busy. It's not quiet. Timothy's anxiety is less when he's in wide open spaces and smaller communities. We've noticed that the air quality in Chicago is not ideal, but it's much better when you get west of the Mississippi, particularly on the northern plains. And we feel like his health would be better there. We've also found in Bismarck that there's good medical care, and there is a Paralympic track team, and there's a multiple of organizations that do things with outdoor sportsman-like activities such as fishing, hunting, camping, water skiing, and horseback riding that all base out of Bismarck. And we feel like Bismarck would be a really good fit for Timothy's health and getting him into young adulthood. I'm going to turn and just look at the brains behind the outfit. Is there anything more I need to say, Jana? Okay, Miss Jana said to let you know how excited we are. And summarize it, we're going to be moving to Bismarck, North Dakota. God willing, we should be there around the first week of November. Going because I've always wanted to live there. I've asked God for 30 years to bring me there. Going to help a church called Revive Christian. Going because Africa Diaspora there, and going because we think it would be good for our son Timothy. I'm probably sounding like a sales pitch right now, and it's hard for me to be too emotional looking just at a camera. But I have sat down a few times in the last few days and just cried tears of joy that I'm going to get to go to North Dakota. I've wanted to be there my whole life, and in the variables, who would have thought this? I would find the variables to get to North Dakota. It's not me going to work on an oil rig. It's not me going just to take a pastor job. It's my family going to serve a young church that we love, to follow up on African immigration, and we've got friends of friends, and we really think we've probably got hundreds of people where we know there are friends of our friends that are in North Dakota, and we really think it's going to be good for Timothy's health. I want to thank all of you who have watched this, and please pass on the message, and we're going to be blogging and talking about this, and we're going to be also asking for some help from helping us pack up a truck, unload a truck, raise some money, and I'll even add this. I have a suspicion that our presence there may clear the way for others. If you're some African immigrants that are going, I'm looking for a place where the culture is more family friendly, more faith friendly, where the economy's doing well, give me a couple months and then call. Let's talk about North Dakota. God's blessings on you guys. Bye-bye. All right. Finish.